CardGamesTV1 Podcast, Zenkai series. So pretty much just want to talk about Zenkai. This Zenkai series is like, finally we got a new series to get into, right? Definitely some new stuff. They got basically they have an extra deck, right? They have just like in YuGiOh, we have an extra deck. So it's nice to have an extra deck to play with, right? Because it just adds another layer to the game. It just gives you some other options. So it opens up the possibility of being creative, doing something creative. For a while, a lot of people was like they don't want an extra deck added to the game because they don't want the game to be like YuGiOh. But the irony is, over 60% of the player base were YuGiOh players. So, well, at least when the game started, it was largely a lot of YuGiOh and Magic, or ex-YuGiOh, ex-Magic players. Some of them went back to playing YuGiOh Magic, obviously, or they went on to like Digimon or some other card game. No surprise. I mean, if you left YuGiOh and Magic to play Dragon Ball Super when you could have just done both, then obviously you're the type of person that will keep hopping on the new thing. I'm not going to go into specifics of why people are doing it, just pointing out that that's typically what happens. Which is why, like I said, it's like a lot of the players that, started out this game was YuGiOh players, Magic players, right? And we were the ones that were promoting it, encouraging people to play as an alternative to the other games, right? An alternative to YuGiOh, alternative to Magic, play Dragon Ball Super. That was the selling point. Give us, credit for where credit's due, right? It's just funny how a lot of people like to act like they've been day one Dragon Ball Super players, right? Where they never played any other card games. Or that everybody who plays Dragon Ball Super, that's the only game they play. It's like, no. We played other games, and then there's the fact of like trying to look down on YuGiOh players, for example. Specifically YuGiOh players. They do look down on Magic players or players that play other card games, but specifically on YuGiOh players, looking down on them, not realizing YuGiOh players are the reason they're even playing Dragon Ball Super. The only reason that Dragon Ball Super is still thriving in a world that YuGiOh, Magic, and Pokemon exist, right? The top three, right? The big three, if you want to call it that, is because of these types of players. They're the ones who definitely facilitated the idea of competitive play, right? Most of these card games, when they first started out, it was meant to be casual. For example, Magic started off casually. Magic inspired YuGiOh, right? Inspired the creation of YuGiOh, right? And then Pokemon was created, right? We all know Pokemon didn't start off as a card game, right? But hey, why not make a card game? Because card games is popular, so why not? And then it became a popular card game. The irony in that, right? Didn't start off as a card game, but Pokemon went into it, and they've been thriving, and they got lots of cards worth buku bucks, and because of them, we have Logan Paul, in the card game world. Oh well. Anyway, the point is, right, is the idea of like looking down at YuGiOh players, like, oh man, we don't want this game to be like YuGiOh, blah 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 blah. This game is not like Magic, it's better, blah, 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 all this extra nonsense. And it's like, no, because without those two games specifically, without YuGiOh, without Magic, there would be no Dragon Ball Super. So show respect to the old card games, right? Respect your elders. Without them, there is no you. And a lot of people have a habit of doing that, especially if they can't hang. We know this hate towards older generation, older of anything old, is always the idea is that because they couldn't hang, as they say, right, with the older card games, the older generations, right, the older of any activity. Of course, they're gonna look down on it. They'll be like, oh, we're so much cooler because we're doing this, that, and the third over here. And it's like, yeah, but without that previous generation, that previous activity, this activity wouldn't exist. If it wasn't for Magic, if it wasn't for YuGiOh, this game wouldn't exist. So show respect to that which created y'all, right? Just like the competitive scene you know, started becoming more and more of a common thing, where more players that came into the game came to play competitively, not really casually. It just, a lot of times they'll fall back into a casual category, especially if they don't have money to play competitively, right? Then they tend to play casual. Then there's competitive casual and, you know, different types. Then there's collectors, and the list goes on, right? But ultimately, you know, we gotta show respect to the originators, right? Because of them, you know, the competitive scene is the way it is. A lot of terms in Dragon Ball Super came from other card games, you know, like YuGiOh and whatnot. And of course, Magic, right? Magic is the one who experiments the most with different mechanics, different card types. They're always trying to create something new, and that inspires other card games to do the same, whether it's carbon copying or creating something similar. Just like Magic has Planeswalkers, Dragon Ball Super has Unisons. YuGiOh has Extra Deck, the ability to play something from an extra deck, a stack of cards, right, that you can play from, not just from your deck. We have it now, you know, and it's our Zenkai area. We even have an area for Zenkai Energy, which basically is just cards you combo, and once per turn you can put a card into your Zenkai Energy area or your Z Energy area once per turn, from what I've heard. So we'll see more about how it works out, but so far seems interesting. A lot of the cards look really good. The Z Awakened Leaders, the Z Battle cards, they're pretty cool. We'll see if they'll do Z Unisons, because it makes sense that maybe even Z Field cards, but we'll see. But Z Unisons more likely will be the next step. They're just starting off with leaders and battle cards because the game started off mainly with leaders, battle cards being the main things that can attack and do damage until Unisons were created. So we'll probably have to wait until set 2 or 3 of the Z series, and then we'll see Z Unisons. I mean, if you think about it, we have Unisons that have the word Z Fighter, the word Z Fighter in their names. So it's not unbelievable to think that they'll have Z Unisons. So it's just putting it out there, just an idea. Since we're talking about the Z series, right? The Zenkai series, so there might be Unisons in the near future. So we'll see. My friend even talked about the idea of Ultimates, Z Ultimates, basically. Since Ultimates are typically battle cards, the possibility of an Z Ultimate is possible. So we'll see. Which would be kind of cool, right? The idea that you could play an always liked the idea that of some way of getting your ultimate, because if you have Cell Zeno in your deck, especially if you're trying to use it as a win con, you need an easy way to get him. If you're trying to use your baby Hatchiac, you want to get your hands on it. If you want to use your Pan Secret Rare, you want to get your hands on it. Like, it's a one-of. It's one copy of a really good card, and it sucks that you have to try to get it through randomness, through getting lucky that you draw it. It would be better, especially if you're a competitive player, right? You don't want things to be random. You want control. You want to choose and make decisions. That's where your skills come in. That's what lets you, brag about being good at the game, because you're actually good at the game, right? By your decisions, not because, randomly you got lucky and you sell Zeno to your opponent, right? It should be deliberate, not accidental. So that's why some card games are not popular with certain players, especially players in the Dragon Ball Super community. They've been vocal about the idea that they don't like a lot of randomness. Part of why they don't like games like, Digimon and whatnot, because there is a certain level of randomness added to the game on purpose, just to make the game unpredictable, right? Just to make the game random. But competitive players don't like random, right? They don't like inconsistency. That's part of randomness, right? Is something being inconsistent, right? Something happening that you didn't want to happen. versus, wanting something to happen. This is also part of why, I understand and put out the idea that, yeah, we should have a maximum hand size. Not saying that Bandai has to do it. I'm just, I want Bandai to do it. No, I'm just saying that it would make sense to have a maximum hand size because it reduces randomness, right? It reduces the possibility of somebody just having a huge hand size just because their opponent dealt them a lot of damage, because they drew a lot of cards from card effects. So all that culminated to them having a huge hand size, and that determines largely whether they win or lose just by that alone. Not because they made good decisions, right? Not because they're able to outplay their opponent strategically. It's like, no, they just have a whole bunch of cards in hand, so they could potentially have a baby Hatchiac in their hand randomly, right? They didn't choose to have the Hatchiac in their hand, they just so happen to have it, right? Or something similar to that, or they just so happen to have exactly the amount of combo power they need in their hands to out combo, let's say 100k attacker or something like that, as an example. I mean, realistically, attack shouldn't even be able to get that high, or it shouldn't be necessary to get that high. A 30k, 40k, maybe even a 50k should be more than enough to go for game, but it doesn't play out that much as often as you think it would, largely because there's some decks that their whole thing is having a large hand size. But oh well, to each their own. I'm just, pointing out an observation, not complaining or anything, just pointing it out. So it would make sense that you would want to minimize these, random factors. These situations where, like, damn, for some reason you just so happen to have 30 cards in your hands, and that is actually stopping me from winning. Just because you have so many cards in your hands. Not anything else, just that. That's the only thing slowing me down. The only thing that's getting in my way. You know what I mean? So there's that. Or for some reason you got everything you need to play your win con, but for some reason you haven't drawn it yet. That can happen. I've had that scenario happen to me once where I didn't draw my win con. I'm like, damn, I did everything right. I played all the cards in the right order to win. My opponent's ready to lose. Right? I just need my win con, and I didn't draw it. So that was funny. There was a time where I had everything set up and I didn't have my win con. It's like, everything set up, don't have the win con. Jesus Christ. But I swung with my leader and I drew a card and I drew my win con. It's like, good, I drew it. I had a feeling that I might draw it. I think I did the whole, what was it? I crit a life so I could go from 3 to 2, draw a card, then awaken, draw 2 more cards, so then I had 3 cards in my hands. Like, dang, still no win con, right? Still no Android 17 turn tide. So I swing with the leader, draw, and like, bang, the 4th card was turning the tides. Like, finally, damn, 4 turns later, I would have drawn turning the tide, but clearly I would have lost before that, right? Or I would have took damage and ended up losing the card through my leader's awaken effect. So that can happen, right? That's the thing about randomness. You don't get to choose when something's random. Anyway, part of why I'm talking about randomness and stuff like that is the fact that it's like, because of the extra deck thing, right? Or Zenkai Zone, whatever deck, Zenkai deck or Z deck. Now you have a little bit more control. Kind of like in YuGiOh, where we have an extra deck where we have some control. As long as you can meet the conditions, you're able to play something on purpose, right? You can play a specific card as a specific solution, a specific out. A way of looking at it is kind of like a side deck that you get to use. Some of us in YuGiOh call it a toolbox. I mean, this term is used in many other card games, but you get the idea. The toolbox concept, right? Whenever there's a problem, you need a solution, right? And that's where your toolbox, aka your side deck or an extra deck, comes into play. Now imagine having an extra deck, right? An extra deck of cards plus your side deck, right? That's why we call it a side deck. We still call it a deck, right? So right there, that gives you a lot of options, right? And options is always good. Choices is always good, especially if you're a competitive player. You want choices. So this just adds more to the competitive scene, more than casual. Casual players will like it and play it, obviously. They'll enjoy their Zenkai stuff. But this is definitely something that will be popular with a competitive scene, you know, competitive players. I mean, I expect them to like this because this is something they've always wanted, right? More control. So imagine if you had a Zenkai card that's actually a search card. It literally, you know, searches out your ultimate. So hopefully they incorporate that. I had that idea originally when they mentioned the idea of, you know, the whole Zenkai thing. It's like, wow, imagine if it's a zone where you could put your ultimate. You could start your ultimate in the Z zone, right, and the Zenkai zone, and then just by meeting a condition, you can add it to your hand, right? That'd be cool. That way, if your deck is based off of trying to play Cell Zeno and win with Cell Zeno, then putting Cell Zeno into the Zenkai area and then accessing it when you need it will be good, because that's the whole thing. If your whole deck is based off of an ultimate, it makes sense to be able to guarantee you can get it so you can play it. You know, me personally, especially as a deck builder, I don't like the idea of having something that I can't use when I want to use it, right? I don't like the idea of having one copy of a card in my deck that's I might not see every time I play the game, right? This is part why I play 4 of everything, because I want to see these cards. Whether I'm going to use them or not, I'd rather see them. You know, whether I'm going to play all my unisons in my decks or not, it's irrelevant. What matters is that I see them, that I have them. So when they're useful, I use them. But when they're not useful, then clearly I don't use them. But I want to make sure that they are useful. So that's the kind of stuff that I look into and focus on, is making sure that when I build a deck, everything in the deck has a use, has a purpose. It's very rare for me to have cards in a deck that have very little use or very little purpose. I mean, very, very rare, because typically my decks are pretty fine-tuned, but there are those rare occasions where I look at an old deck and I'm like, you know what, that card is a good card, but it doesn't have that much utility, right? It doesn't have that much use. It's a good card. It's just like, you know what, I could have done without that card in that deck. More likely at that time, you know, I obviously had justification for the card being in the deck, but eventually, you know, when you're constantly improving like I am, you get to the point where it's like, not to the point, but you get to a point where it's like, yeah, you know what, that deck, I can actually play that deck without 12 unisons. Let me take 4 of them out, right? And bring them down to at least 8 unisons. I can work with that. And I put something else in, let's say super combo. You know, the Napa super combo will be good in this deck. You know, that kind of stuff. Like, those will be the rare occasions. Part of it is largely because the game might have changed. There might be some new, especially like, for example, these unison decks. It's like, Napa super combo will be useful against these unison decks, because when somebody's swinging, you know, multiple times with unisons in a single turn, you know, you might want to try to out-combo them, right? So the Napa super combo will be useful because you can stop one unison swing, then stop another one with just one super combo. So in that scenario, you know, the Napa will be useful, right? Which is why I would recommend using it, because of that possibility. So little things like that, like any small change, any new thing. For example, just recently, you know, start playing YuGiOh again. Oh man, the crack is real. Woo! Shit, I can't wait to finish this podcast and go inside and play some YuGiOh, because man, it's been a while and it's very addictive. But anyway, mainly because I win. But anyway, the point is the fact that right now, a lot of decks are playing with back row, and the game has been back row-less for more than 4 years now. So I haven't really been doing anything Yu-Gi-Oh related in a couple of years now, mainly because most decks are, hand trap heavy, monster deck heavy. So it's relatively easy to deal with those decks and beat those decks because they're not using back row. They're not using traps, right? So because of that, there's not much for me to do because it's like, I'm just going to win every time. But now, because they're playing traps and stuff, I'm like, ooh, I got to change my decks up a little bit. I got to tweak them a little bit because now they are using back row. So I can't take advantage of the fact that they are not playing traps. People are playing traps again. So now I got to put some trap hate, right? So now I had to modify one of my decks, which is my main deck that I play with, on the Yu-Gi-Oh simulator, and I definitely had to play some back row hate, and it's been working. You know what I mean? It's definitely been helping because it was tough. Because of course when I came back, started playing again, I wasn't using back row hate because most people haven't been playing back row. Whenever I'm against a deck that does have traps, mostly Eldritch, then it's like, all right, this is gonna be a tough match. I have to try to play through that back row. So my experience has to kick in. But, I always say that you want to make the game easier for you but harder for your opponent. So even though I have, some experience to, outplay my opponent's back row and stuff like that, I'd rather not have to go that far, right? Why try hard to do something when you could simplify it and make life easier? It's the whole work smarter, not harder. Like, I encourage the idea that sometimes you got to work harder, right? Sometimes you just don't have it. If you don't own a baby hatch, all right, you don't have baby hatch. So find something else that's good enough. Or make the cards you already have decent. Use your sparking negates, strategically, and your combo power strategically in a way that allows you to survive a turn as if you did play a baby hatch. That kind of stuff. That's the whole working harder, not smarter. Smarter would just be drop motherfucking hatch and get that extra turn already, right? That will make your life easier, right? Or play Pan if you can afford Pan, which you should because she's relatively cheap. She's definitely cheaper than Hatchiac. Then do that. Now, ironically, I just recently saw that there's a reprint of Hatch, which I'm happy for. I want that. So I'm all for it. I've been asking for that for a long, long time for Hatchiac to be reprinted. And then we got a second edition of Hatch, so that dropped the value of Hatch already. So for like 150, I could get a Hatch, which it's actually within my price range. Because for me, it's like if an ultimate's under 200, it's good value. The fact that Hatch is 150 right now, and we know it's Hatchiac, definitely good value. But I am interested in the artwork of the new Hatchiac, so I'm debating, should I get the one that has the original art, which I'm so used to, or which is a badass art nonetheless, or get that new Wakanda Forever Hatchiac, basically, because he has his arms crossed and I want that one. So should I get that one? I mean a simple solution would be for me to get both, right? 2 for the price of 1, basically. Give me both hats. We'll see how it is. We'll see, if my money from my check into my savings and my offshore bank accounts, goes through, and I'll scoop them up. That's probably what I would do. I'll probably just buy both, just so I can have both art and play whichever one I feel like whenever I feel like it. Here's the thing. One would be for me to use for any deck that I build, and then one would be for my main blue deck, because I have a Super Saiyan 3 Goku deck, and it would be nice to have a Hatchiac in there. So I think I'll use the original art for that deck, and then the alternate art would be for my other decks. For whatever blue deck I build, I could throw that Hatchiac in there. So I think that's what I'll do, buy both and then do that. But anyway, so I just finished making that decision. I'm gonna buy both. All right, so problem solved. Let's see, what was I talking about besides Hatch? What was I talking about? ultimates, reprints, wanting the card. I told myself Zeno, building decks around ultimates, Zenkai to get to the ultimate. We'll see. All right, so that's some of the stuff I remember talking about. But let's just get back to Zenkai. There's cards. There's a new Hatchiac. We don't know what it does. There's a new Hatchiac card. It's a black card, obviously. And it's a generic black. I didn't see no specified color, so it's going to be generic. We'll see if it has any conditions where it's like you got to have a black machine mutant leader or some shit like that to use it. I would like it to be generic where anyone could use it. You know, any black player could use it, or anybody could splash it in. Just like how we splash in Oceanus in every deck. I know I do. But she's essentially the top of all my decks, right? Just like Pan is the baby Hatchiac of all my decks. So this would be nice if this is a really, really cool Hatchiac that I could splash into decks. So we'll see if it's that level of generic. I was thinking of different stuff like, could it be an overwhelm card? Could it be something that will help you awaken your leader? Like it's specifically to help you awaken your leader, or is it a dual attacker? Is it going to be a finisher? Right? Or is this going to be something we can put in Hatchiac and go for game with? Another thing is like, what is the Hatchiac deck supposed to do originally? What was the purpose of it? Right? If you think about it, like, what was the purpose of it? Was it a mill deck? No. We can make it a mill deck, but was it? Was it a burn deck? No, but we can make it, right? So the thing is, like, what was Hatchiac supposed to be? What was the whole concept behind the Hatchiac deck? Other than try to play stuff for free. Now, one of the things is, obviously, anti-aggro, right? Slow down the ability for people to attack with a whole bunch of attackers, unless they're unisons. Then we failed at that, right? But slow down battle cards from swinging a lot. Multiple battle cards from swinging, but it doesn't prevent them from dual attack, right? Triple attack. So it's like, okay, so it's the idea of the Hatchiac cards is to bypass the effect of the leader, right? That kind of stuff. Yo, imagine if this Hatchiac's effect is to make it where the leader effect doesn't affect you. Like by having it on the field, the leader effect does not restrict you from attacking with all your battle cards. Like negate your leader skill forward during this turn. Negate your leader's card. All right, permanent. During your turn, your leader's permanent is negated. Permanent is, you get it. Your leader's permanent is negated for the turn. All right, imagine that. That way it still applies on your opponent, but it doesn't apply on you. So that way on your turn, you're not restricted to how many battle cards you can attack with, right? You can attack with all your battle cards. So if you have a whole bunch of them, if you overwhelmed and all that stuff, everything you have on your side field, you can attack. That would be something very useful for Hatch. Because we definitely would love to take advantage of that. Being able to play a whole bunch of battle cards, right? Overwhelm, right? So that we have all these attackers and attack with all of them. And not be held back by our own leader. So it'd be kind of cool to have something like that, right? Have a Hatchiac that does that. Other possibilities is that it's a floodgate negate, it's a blocker. If your leader's Hatchiac, you can play for free. That kind of stuff. Maybe has a built-in. Oh, somebody mentioned the idea of it having barrier hate, which I agree. We do need some barrier hate, some barrier warp hate specifically. Let's warp some shit. So barrier hate will be useful. I agree. I was even thinking the idea that the hatch might also evolve, be used to evolve. So it's another union absorb basically. It can evolve into any of the old Hatchiacs. So the idea of it being support, it makes it easier to summon the bigger, higher cost Hatchiacs. So that'd be kind of cool. Like that would definitely be useful because that would make those old Hatchiac battle cards useful. especially when they had relatively decent effects. It's just that their conditions to play made them hard to play, which is why we skipped, which is why most of us just flat out didn't play the cards. But this card can make it easier to play those cards, so then that'll be the point, right? This will help bring those cards back into the game, back into use. And I'm all for cards that make other cards playable. Because if they're not, boo. Another thing I'm excited for is there's a Zenkai Janemba. So hopefully most of us Janemba players, which is very few of us, are definitely going to be excited for that, because we definitely want something extra to our Janemba. So we'll see what it does. Hopefully it has mill effects. Obviously that's what we want the most, right? Beggars can't be choosers, as they say, right? Because if I get to choose, I would choose for it to do some really, really busted stuff. All right, I might have to pause for a bit because. So yeah, I'm back. Zenkai. Like I said, the Janemba stuff, the Janemba Zenkai leader, that's gonna be cool. And I know this is blue, so this is definitely for blue, Janemba mill, and hopefully it has milling capabilities. That's my wishful thinking, is for it to have the ability to mill a lot. Just trying to think how much milling can I justify. Let's say its ability to mill is based off of your opponent's hand size. So your opponent mills 1 card for every 2 cards in their hands. So if they have 6 cards in their hands, your opponent mills 3. If your opponent has 10 cards in their hands, they mill 5. You get the idea. They have 30 cards in their hands, they definitely need to mill 15. How dare you draw that much? So that'd be kind of cool. So, like I said, wishful thinking, right? So we'll see. Because one of the things I noticed about the Z leaders is that they're very powerful. Like, they're designed to be like really strong. So in a way, they kind of act like an ultimate if you think about it. So we'll see. We'll also see the limits. Like I obviously I should have done my research. I should have looked more into the information. I'm just going off of like some secondhand word of mouth stuff. Saw a couple images, saw a couple stuff, but I haven't really dived deep into the information that's currently available about the Zenkai series. Because there's probably tons of information there. I just haven't looked at it yet myself. But just wanted to talk about my thoughts about it. Obviously, just the idea of how interesting this might be. How the possibility that, like, me and my friend were talking about the idea of, like, that we only have very few win conditions in this game, right? Different, we have deck out, right? You win through milling your opponent out. You win through burn, dealing your opponent damage, right? Either through burn or through attacks. And then there's the auto win con, effect. Like, there's some cards that have the skill to win you the game automatically. Victory strike, yeah, that's another auto win con effect. So you get the idea. So essentially what I'm saying is what we're talking about is not something new per se, just a different way to, like, win, right? Pretty much just another auto win con, which is the Dragon Ball concept, because it's like, this is a Dragon Ball game, right? And the old scored DBZ game, had a auto win con condition or a win condition. Other than, I think, if I'm right, you do deck your opponent out, or no, they had a rule where if you ran out of cards, you just took your graveyard, shuffled it back into your deck, and then just played again. Just kept going. But they had another win condition, which was the Dragon Balls. Collect all 7 Dragon Balls and then make the wish to win the game, right? That's the theme of it, right? if you collect all 7 Dragon Balls, you can wish to win the game, which is, right, the goal. So that's something I noticed that we don't have. What's ironic is the Super Shenron leader doesn't have that as a condition. It should have had that as a condition. It should have been you remove the 7 Dragon Balls if you have, well, the original version said 20 cards. Now it says 30. I think somebody mentioned it has to be 30 battle cards specifically or some extra shit like this. Like, oh, gotta double check. I do have the revision version, so I gotta double check the leader to see if it says battle card or cards in general. It better just be cards in general. That'd be stupid if it's battle cards. But anyway, you know, but you get an extra turn, and in some ways, some people might see that as like, well, technically that's an auto win, getting an extra turn, especially after you had a battle phase where you already dealt a lot of damage. Your opponent already comboed a lot of cards from their hands, so the hand size is very, very small. If you're fortunate, unless their hand size is still big after all that, right? And then you get the extra turn, and then go for game, and it'll probably be hard for your opponent to defend after that. Yeah, but what if they do? What if they do defend? What if they do survive? What if they drop a baby Hatchiac on your next turn, right? On your extra turn, then it'll be their turn. They hit you back on the clapback and they win. So it's not really much of a thing, right? It's not really a win. Auto. It's not guaranteed, right? You want something that's guaranteed. When you win, you want to win, right? That's why it's called winning, because you actually win. So that's, and a win con is supposed to be that thing that lets you win, that gets you the victory. So, you know, Super Shenron definitely should have been remove the 7 Dragon Balls, and then if you have, you know, the 30 plus cards in your drop, then you win, and that should have just been its effect. But they didn't do that. But it's just interesting that a lot of the wish leaders' wish effects aren't thematic. Like they're not trying to mimic actual wishes that were made in the Dragon Ball series and turn them into like, you know, a mechanic, right? If I'm right, there's an Oolong Shenron leader, right? If I'm right, I could be wrong. And you would think that when you use its wish effect, you know, it will give you something, like it might give you the underwear that he wished for, and the underwear card has an effect, and whatever effect you want to make that be, you know. But that's the kind of stuff that, you know, I think about. It's like it would be cool to, you know, make things thematic, right? You know, we even talked about the idea of like one of the wish leaders, like when you do the 7 Dragon Balls, essentially when you make the wish, you know, one of the wishes could be your opponent, you know, hand size is reduced down to 6. Right, so you deliberately can reduce your opponent's hand size down to 6, right? Which is, you know, fair balance. It's 1 card more than Plain God Zeno. It's 3 cards more than what's his name, Perfect Force Cell. It's 6 cards more than Android 17 Turn of the Tides. So you get the idea, right? So basically, it's essentially a pseudo turning the tide like effect without being a turn the tide effect, or a Gogeta 7 drop effect without being Gogeta 7 drop, right? So you get the idea. That would be cool, you know, especially if you're in a scenario where a lot of your matchups is against decks that draw a lot. An effect like that would be useful, right? Because it will help you combat that type of situation. Just like having a wish where you can warp your opponent's unison. That'd be useful, right? All right. All right. 10-4. what was I saying? What else? I don't want to talk too long. This has been long enough, but it's going to be interesting to see what they do for the game, what they add. I was just talking about the whole wish thing, how it could have been done. We'll see. They could have, they could upgrade on how wish works, operates. Because right now we have Z Awaken, right? Which is an upgraded version of Awaken. So there could be Z Wish. So since I was talking about Wish, why not? They could do Z Wish. That'd be interesting, right? Well, I definitely would like a Z Wish to get my SCR, especially if I have if my SCR is like a win con, like Cell Zeno, for example, then I would wish to get my SCR into my hand, right? So that kind of stuff. So we'll see what they do, but there's some potential. That's the thing. It's always good to think of what could be added to the game. It's something I do a lot. I think about what could be added to the game. So I look at, it's the whole pattern recognition thing. I look at what exists currently in the game and see the potential of what could exist. Sometimes I think about how a new Hatchiac leader could be, right? For example, like how a new Janemba leader could be, right? A new, Mill Janemba, that kind of stuff. I think of what new leaders could exist, what new mechanics could exist, and if it does exist, what I'm gonna do with it. And part of mechanics, right, especially adding anything to the game, is to give you something extra, right? Give you something extra working. Like when we first saw unisons, I was immediately based off of how unisons work on the whole marker system, whenever you take damage, whenever the unison's attacked, it loses a marker instead of dying, right? Then I was like, imagine if they made blocker unisons. That'd be awesome. That would be perfect. That'd be perfect blockers, right? That'd be something you'll definitely want. I've been wanting something like that. Reliable blockers. Anything similar to Hatchiac's leader effect as a unison or as a card. I even had the idea of a Deadly Defender unison. A unison that when it's in rest mode, it makes it where your opponent can't attack the leader, right? So they're going to have to attack the unison. Obviously, we can't let the unison be, a unison that pluses markers, because obviously that'd be too busted. Because then you'll pretty much never get attacks through onto your opponent's leader. So that would be a problem. So obviously, have a permanent where the power of the unison gets decreased. Obviously, maybe even add the condition that for every 1 damage it takes, it loses one extra marker. That way, if you do double strike, it would be 4 damage, or 4 markers would be removed instead of 2. If you do single strike, it'll be like double strike, right? It'll be 2 markers, that kind of stuff. So if it's triple strike, it'll be 6 markers. You get the idea. That way, it makes it a little bit balanced, so it's not too strong, right? That way, I guess it'll be 2 single strikes could take down a unison that has 4 markers. In that type of scenario, right? So that way it'd be a little bit fair, but it'd be interesting, right? A unison that has a built-in Deadly Defender. Technically, we have 2 unisons that kind of give you the Deadly Defender thing, but you need a battle card to go with it. I'm just saying that in general, the unison itself should be the Deadly Defender, right? Instead of you needing something else for it, it is the Deadly Defender. But make it where it's not too difficult to get rid of it, so that way you could still have the potential to attack through. The idea is to make the game harder, not impossible. I'm always saying you want to make the game easier for yourself, but harder for your opponent, but not impossible for yourself or your opponent, right? So we definitely can't have it where it's impossible for you to win a game or for you to lose a game, right? Even though I want more stuff for Hatchiac to make it more awesome, basically make it, perfect and unbeatable, right? Where no one can ever deal you damage. Right? That'd be too exaggerated. that'd be too much. I mean, if we can make it happen, we can make it happen. I'm just saying Bandai doesn't have to literally make it happen. Where like, here's a card, here's a Unison. It works just like a Deadly Defender. Like, damn, that's disrespectful. Well, we definitely can't have Deadly Defender Unison and Hatchiac. I agree with that. We definitely can't. That'd be too easy. That will literally make Hatchiac perfect. Because we already have the leader's effect, and then throw a Deadly Defender Unison on top of that. That'd be too much. Too much. But I still want a blocker Unison that's black for Hatch. But, you know, that's wishful thinking. Let's see. But I guess I'll leave it at that because I'm just going to get into a whole bunch of Hatchiac talk. And that's the end of the podcast.